Tourette's podcast is not a medical advice show. It's a show about experiences. In the course of that, we may talk about medications or therapies or stories from the doctor's office, but don't mistake any of that for medical advice or direction. It's not. Get that only from people or places licensed or certified to give it, not from a massively fun and action-packed podcast about our life experiences. Such as?
A lot of time I tell people Tourette syndrome is not just about the tics, but the comorbidities that can be really damaging to us,
People see these motor tics, they may hear the vocal tics, right? But beneath the surface, there's a lot more going on.
This is Tourette's podcast, made possible with support of the Tourette Association of America and part of the Geeks Rising Network. Welcome to episode 4 of season 8 of Tourette's podcast. Yet another treat in that we have more minds to open up with an amazing guest host and an amazing guest. We'll get right to it. First, I want to give a shout out to recent new members of the Tourette's podcast discussion group on Facebook, run by the amazing Sophia in the UK. We've recently welcomed Sam, CP, Alyssa, Brittany, Ryan, Glory, Annie, and I think there might be some more I'm missing, but thank you for being part of the discussion group where you can interact with hundreds and hundreds of other listeners, ask questions, and point things out from episodes. Tourette's podcast discussion group on Facebook. Welcome to all the new members there and to all new listeners in general. Huge apologies if you haven't gotten a response to something you've sent me, tourettespodcast@gmail.com. Please keep writing in, saying hey, asking questions. I read everything and respond to everything that I can. Please keep sending your thoughts in. Again, tourettespodcast@gmail.com or through the contact portal at tourettespodcast.com. Question from Sam here. Says, hi, I'm a new listener and I have a question. I am 20 years old and have only developed tics in the past 3 years. I did not have tics as a child that I or my parents were aware of. My tics in the past few months have been getting worse, and I'm not sure what I have or what to do. Are adult onset tics a thing? Can you get Tourette's as an adult? I have motor, vocal, and facial tics. Thanks. So great question. There's a ton of scientific looking into with adults developing tics and what might appear to be Tourette syndrome. And I know where the question comes from with so many historical focus points, I guess on it being a quote unquote childhood disorder. That Tourette's is a childhood onset disorder and it may go away as you get older and develop. That's part of the narrative. But, on this podcast, we emphasize that, wait a minute, it might not go away when you become an adult, as is the case for so many adults here, including myself. But Sam, your question is a little different than that. And that's about developing tics as an adult with no apparent history of it in childhood. Now, again, I'm not a neurologist. I'm not a doctor of anything. I'm a podcast host with Tourette syndrome. That's my life experience. But through that, I've heard from a great mix of people who've developed what looks like Tourette syndrome as adults. And while I can't diagnose Sam here, I do know that if you're experiencing vocal and motor tics and wondering how to navigate that, then this community definitely accepts you. Because to me, it's all about quality of life and life experience. And yeah, definitions matter when we're talking about things scientifically. But Sam, I hope you're finding the podcast to be a companion or a source of info to help with the life experience part of it. But I also assure you that there are plenty of adults listening who have told me they've developed tics later in life. So outside of what would be called, I guess, the standard. The Tourette Association of America, I know, has plenty of support for adults with Tourette. I'll put a link in the show notes with this episode to part of TAA's website for adults with a tic disorder. But Sam, thanks for your question and keep asking questions to the discussion group, to the Tourette Association. If you find a neurologist, I would love to hear how that goes. I know getting a Tourette diagnosis is not as simple as just showing up at the neurologist with tics, because we hear from people who have a hard time getting a diagnosis too. Anyway, Sam, thanks for your question and best of luck and keep in touch. Speaking of adults with TS, I'm so excited about our guest host this week. You might already know him, and if you do know him, you probably already love him. Peter Zhao, who you might know as Fabulously Tourette on social media, host of Fabulously Tourette Radio. That's Peter Zhao, and he's at the helm on this one. He's such a great, engaged host, great questions with our really solid guest, Slayton. Slayton is in high school and has been handling Tourette for a few years at this point. And Slayton and Peter find plenty of interesting stuff to talk about. I didn't give them a lot of information on the other, before this recording. I wanted them to just kind of, two people with Tourette talking about it so they can get to know one another and discover their intersections along the way, organically as they go. Peter and Slayton both experience corpolalia, for instance, and Peter discusses an interesting skill that he's crafted to compete with his corpolalia, which ends up resonating with Slayton, who has been through CBIT, or Comprehensive Behavioral Intervention for Ticks, which is a way of developing competing behaviors to ticks to try to impact those ticks. There is some talk about medications they've been on, approaches they've taken to treatment, and remember, that's not direction for you to seek out the same treatments or anything like that. They also talk about side effects they've experienced while taking certain meds, and that could be different person to person. My experience on a certain medication may be completely different from your experience on a certain medication. So remember, this is just a podcast. This is not a medical advice show. We just talk about what we've been through and what we think about it. These are just individual experiences being discussed here, meaning they're anecdotal. So bear that in mind. Get your medical direction, medical advice from a qualified professional, and always be skeptical of proposed solutions that sound too good to be true. That's just some general policy stuff for the podcast here, but I'll be quiet now. Please enjoy this great conversation between Peter and Slayton.
All right, good morning. Here's my radio voice,
All right.
This beautiful Saturday morning. I'm out here in New York. Blue sky, had some thunderstorm overnight, and woke up feeling refreshed. So this morning, I'm honored to be the guest host on the world famous Tourette podcast, where real people talk about real experience with Tourette syndrome and comorbidity. I want to welcome a special guest coming all the way from the Pacific Northwest. Slayton Cooper will be joining us. Hi, Slayton. Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic, man. How's the weather over there?
It's a bit cloudy, a bit rainy, but my mood is great, and that's what matters. So
that's good. You guys being hot this summer?
Oh, it's been quite hot. Yeah, we've been getting a lot of sun, which we usually don't get. So I've been trying to enjoy that as much as I can.
Do you think you tick more in the hot weather?
Oh, that's a great question. I haven't really thought about that, actually. So I think maybe. I definitely when I wear sunscreen or when I have uncomfortable touch stimuli, and sunscreen's very oily and greasy, and I don't like the feeling of that, so that does make my ticks worse. But yeah, I definitely say so. I mean, I kind of enjoy the rain. I kind of enjoy cloudiness, because then I don't get sunburnt. And I know the listeners can't see this right now, but I am pale and I'm a redhead, so I tend to burn easily in the sun. So
I know what you mean. Yeah, I know what you mean. This year I'm in a perfect olive tone. I got a lot of sun. New York, my part of New York has been experiencing a slight drought, so haven't been that humid. I tend to tick a lot more when it's humid, but when it's just dry heat, I tend to feel a lot more comfortable. That being said, I kind of jumped the gun a little bit, but now let me rewind back a little bit. How about a little introduction about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. My name is Slayton Cooper, as Peter mentioned at the beginning. I am 16 years old. I'm a junior in high school in Washington State, and I have Tourette syndrome. And I was diagnosed at age 12. I've been having tics since I was age 5. But it's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be on this podcast. I've listened to it for over a year now. And, it's really been a constant throughout my journey with Tourette's. And so it's awesome to be able to share about my experiences with other people. So thank you for this.
Hey, you're very welcome. And of course, I want to thank the original host, Ben, for lending me the spot and giving me more exposure. I run my own little podcast myself called Fabulously Tourette Radio. And hey, maybe after this show, I can bring you onto my show and we can talk more.
That'd be awesome.
That'd be awesome, right? So a little introduction about myself. I share some similarity with you, actually. I was diagnosed of Tourette syndrome, ADHD, OCD at 12. My first tick exhibited around I was 8. As I mentioned, let me see, season 3, episode 12, I think. That's when I was also on Tourette podcast. I talked about my onset tick that I used to stick my tongue out like a snake at age 8. And from there, I got diagnosed at 12. I've been medicated. I'm 42 now, but my peak experience with Tourette was definitely from my school days. Junior high school and high school. And so I can definitely relate with you in some aspects, But hey, so you mentioned you were diagnosed at 12. What type of tick did you exhibit in your early days when you were?
So I think my earliest ticks were around age 5, and they were, I'd say, relatively minor ticks, and they were all motor ticks at the time. I would say scrunch my nose like a little bunny, or I would blink my eyes a lot in a row, until I got that perfect feeling, right? But little things like that.
Perfect feeling. Yes, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, exactly. I love that we can all relate to these things, these niche topics. That's so cool. But yeah, little things like that. And then, as I got older, I started exhibiting more complex tics. I started having arm movements, so complex motor tics. And then I think it was around age 11 or maybe age 10, I started having vocal tics. I would grunt, or I would sniff or clear my throat, stuff like that. But age 12 is when I started exhibiting corpolalia, and then it kind of progressed from there. So.
Oh, you also had corpolalia. Yeah,
I do. Yes.
I myself had corpolalia. I had one form of corpolalia before I started medication. I used to repeat FU in Mandarin Chinese.
Oh, interesting.
Right. I speak Mandarin Chinese. I was born and raised in China, and I came here at age 10. But then after I took medication, I continued to have corpolalia. But by then, I used to repeat either FU or FUB. And I also have what they call a corpographia, where I uncontrollably doodle obscene stuff. Like I used to draw penises everywhere, So yeah, so I've definitely had those niche Tourette syndrome activities, So I can definitely relate with you.
That's interesting. I haven't heard of. Did you say corpographia? Is that what it's called?
Corpographia, yeah.
Interesting. I haven't heard of that. So I've heard of copopraxia. Interesting or complex, like obscene movements where you say flip the bird or something, which I do occasionally.
Right. I did that too, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. But I haven't heard of that. That's interesting.
Yeah. It is. It's an interesting world, And when I was doing those when I was young, I had no idea they had a name attached to it. So later on, as the world advanced into more knowledge for Tourette's, and I learned, wow, there's actually a name for all these movements. That's really cool.
Right. When a name was kind of, diagnosed to your situation and to your condition, was that comforting for you, or was it kind of relieving, or what did you feel at that time when you got diagnosed?
When I was in China at the time, my dad already took me to see a doctor when I was sticking on my tongue. But China has always never really been that much into Tourette awareness. I know even now they kind of lack on that part. So when I came to the States, living in New York, I found out Tourette Association of America headquarters is in New York City. So very luckily, I moved to the town where the headquarters of Tourette Syndrome Association is, Bayside, New York. So very luckily, I found them. Of course, it was for me. It was not so much of a relief. For me, it was like a revelation, a self-discovery. Wow, finally, I can attach a name to all this going on. Because prior to this, my mom took me to see a lot of different doctors, Eastern medicine, Western medicine. And they all sort of hover around the ADHD portion, but no one really jumped onto this new name, Tourette syndrome. And then,
Right.
so
Right.
when I heard that, it was totally new. And on top, they tell me it's not just a tick; it's a lot of different things. So it was definitely a learning experience for myself.
Awesome. Yeah, I can kind of relate to you in that it allowed me to learn more about myself and about others, right? You get to see and become more familiar with the medical field, right? In different parts of the world, as you did, right? You experience the differences in China and here in the States, and I think those experiences are really important because it shows you where we need to work and where our priorities lie. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. Yeah.
I gotta say, man, you got quite a voice for podcast, man. Because I know when you came on, Ben was telling me that you have great conversational skill. You definitely do, man. And you sound definitely beyond your age, So I can definitely see yourself running a podcast maybe one day too,
I
You
do
have a really good
actually.
voice.
I
Oh, you
do.
do?
I do
Wow.
run my own podcast. Yes. It's
That's
called
cool.
I don't know. Am I allowed to
Sure.
to say it? Okay. It's called My Crazy Brain.
Mhm.
I'm just getting it going now, but I talk about the crazy things that our crazy brains make us do, because they can be quite weird and quite crazy sometimes. So
Crazy brain. Cool, man. I mean,
yeah.
I guess I can also find you on like Spotify, things like that.
Yep. Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon. Yeah, all large podcast platforms. I'm on there.
Oh, awesome, man. Awesome. Yeah,
for sure.
If you need a guest, hit me up,
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Cool. We can cross podcast. That's great, man. That's the most important thing. We got to share, man. We got to talk. When I was diagnosed in junior high school, I was bullied every day. And I love school. I love to go to school, but the bullying just make the school experience very much a turn off. Plus, I was learning English at the time, and I was trying to assimilate into a new culture. So I was really made fun of from every other aspects. So have you experienced bullying in school because of Tourette's?
I have. Yeah, unfortunately. But I would also say, and I can relate to you in that I love school. I love learning. I'm a bit of a self-proclaimed nerd.
Oh, good.
I like studying. I like learning. I like taking tests. As weird as it sounds, but yeah. So I enjoyed going to school every day. I enjoyed that bus ride early in the morning, and so when I started getting made fun of and uh, teased and ostracized because of my Tourette's and my tics, it was very discomforting, and it made me feel flawed, like there was something wrong with me, and I really didn't like that. So yeah, and I don't think anybody with Tourette should feel flawed. This is the way we were made, and this is the way we are meant to be. So
I'm sorry
yeah.
about your experience with bullying. Around when was this? Like junior high school? Because I know kids tend to be more mean, in junior high school, and they become a little bit wiser when they get into high school. So I know a lot of my bullies. Some of my bullies in high school eventually came back and they actually apologized, for their childish, mean behavior from junior high school. So were you getting more bullying in the earlier days or later?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say most of the bullying that I experienced, and it wasn't to a great degree, because I was still, I was a relatively friendly person, very social. Although I would say Tourette impacted that, and we can move on to that later. But it mostly occurred in middle school, so
Oh.
around 6th, 7th grade. And yeah, it's because most people in that age are uneducated, and with regards to neurodiversities, right? And it's new to them, and it's strange, and it's foreign, and they don't know how to handle it. And so, what do? Oh, you make fun of it, and because that's how they seek comfort in that new strange environment. And so, yeah, I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt, and the way I went about that was giving a presentation at the beginning of each one of my classes at the beginning of the school year, just to tell people, hey, this is me. This is what I'm going to do. I might say weird things sometimes. I can't control it. And try not to tease me, try not to look at me, try not to, point. So yeah, it's all about clearing up misconceptions and educating people so that they can be kinder to other people, not just you, but other people as well.
Excellent, man. So yeah, I'm finding more and more relating points with you because I exhibit a lot of my blunt of my tics, like seizure, like motor tics, corpolalia, corpographia, all around 7th grade. That's the peak, and teachers couldn't step in, so my mom just basically told me, you got to fight for it. She said, you got
Yeah.
to use your fist and prove a point. So yeah, I ended up giving my one of the biggest bully, a black guy, and afterwards, I wrote a long confession. The principal asked us to write a confession. Well, you did this and that. So my bully was squeezing like a empty pack of toothpaste, and he finally squeezed out like 2 sentences. I just came here for 2 years. I'm still learning new language. I ended up writing a whole page. A lot of us Tourettes are very creative. So I wrote out a whole page, uh, talking about the fight, talking about why I fought, and talk about what kind of solution the school should bring. And from that moment, I said, you know what, I gotta tell people about what Tourette is instead of having them guessing and what Tourette is not. So, like you said, I brought myself in front of every class, every new semester. I go up to the class and I tell them and who I am, where I'm from, and what's Tourette syndrome and what's not. So some kids still make fun of me right there, but more kids began to pay attention to me from a positive way. And that led to eventually I did the talk from junior high school until high school, and by end of the year in high school, some of the older former bullies eventually they befriended me, but they came up to me and they apologized for the way they acted when they were junior high school, and then they gave me a lot of respect for continuing to push for awareness. So when you said you used to bring yourself in front of the class, I thought, damn, another relating point.
Right. That's inspiring. I love that. And the key takeaway I got from all of that was that these past bullies eventually befriended you. What was that like for you? Like, was that relieving, or what feelings were associated with that?
Yeah, it was definitely relieving. It was comforting. It was a humbling experience as well, and it just overall is a very positive feeling that I mean, at the time we were in high school senior already. Well, I was almost 18, and I already worked, so I seen a few things in the real world. So I appreciate people able to walk back their past mistakes and then trying to do something better. So it was definitely a relieving feeling and very comforting.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. I love that, and that's so inspiring. Again, I applaud you for what you've done.
Well,
I know that's not easy, and it takes a lot of courage, a lot of guts to step up there in front of people who have maybe even bullied you in the past as well. But yeah, that's awesome.
hey, thank you, man. I want to thank you also for your courage and go out there, and I'm sure you also inspire a lot of people as well, so keep rocking that.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So after you got diagnosed, were you introduced to any medication?
Yeah, great question. So after I was diagnosed, I was around 12 at the time, and yeah, my tics were so severe that my doctor immediately prescribed me. I believe it was clonidine at the time.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't last very long, but at the same time, I started undergoing cognitive behavioral intervention for tics, CBIT therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and I did that for 8 months,
Mm-hmm.
and it I would like to say it helped, not as much as I would have liked, but it did help to a very significant degree, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that was more effective than the initial medications that I was prescribed. And after that was all through and done, I was prescribed Topamax,
Okay, cool. Yeah, I heard that before.
Yeah, sodium topramate, I believe is the official name. But I was prescribed Topamax and guanfacine, and yeah, and so I'm still on those to this day. I take that along with Zoloft, which I have found that really helps my ticks, which is surprising. But yeah, those are great questions.
Topamax, right? That's like a anticonvulsant, right? Type of medicine, right?
Yes, yeah, it's an anticonvulsant.
Okay, I have never taken anticonvulsant because when I was diagnosed at the time, I was just told that was when I was diagnosed back in 1992. The probably one of the only medicine out there is able to treat Tourette. It was ORAP. It was a it was an infamous antipsychotic, like a first generation psychotic, which was packed with side effects. What kind of side effects did you experience from your medications?
Yeah, and this is where it gets this is the good stuff. So side effects are really I don't think they're spoken about enough. We talk about treatments, we talk about Tourette and medication, right? But I don't think side effects are really spoken of, because I just think that they're the fact that they're so debilitating, it just deserves to be spoken about. So
yep.
Clonidine, it made me like really dizzy. I don't know why. So I went off of that, and it didn't really help my ticks too much, so it wasn't really working. And then Topamax, it makes me really tired, as does guanfacine, I believe. But they both make me really tired. And I noticed Topamax, it's really interesting. I'm a soccer player. I've been playing soccer for my entire life. And when I started taking Topamax, I noticed it was taking me a lot longer to think and to move when I was at soccer practice or in a soccer game, right? And I don't know, it was because there was this kind of delay between what I want my brain to do, or what I want my muscles to do and limbs to do, in between when they were actually doing them. And so that was a very frustrating side effect, because I started, soccer became something that was really frustrating, and I didn't really enjoy it anymore. Whereas it used to be something that, I looked forward to, and I wouldn't tick, because I was so focused, right? But another funny side effect would be Zoloft, or no, I believe it's Prozac. I took Prozac for a while, and I had uncontrollable yawning. It was just nonstop, and I don't know if it was a tick or not, but I would yawn pretty much incessantly. So,
yeah, you definitely hit the nail on that. Through my participation with various Tourette groups, I've also heard a lot of people talking about side effects, and I've also heard a lot of users of similar medication that you took, and side effects like dizziness, feeling numb, feeling like you're not really there, have been widely talked about by a lot of people. But even myself, one of my frustrating feeling was at the time in the 90s, that, when I try to explain the side effects to the doctors, and they just blink their eyes, they don't have any feedbacks, as if I just got to take it, there's no other way around it. And so it was really frustrating. And on top, my mother, despite she was supportive in her way, but a lot of time I feel like she wasn't trying to put herself into my shoes. So when I talk about my side effects, and she pretty much only focused on the tick relieving aspect of the medication, but she isn't hearing me talking about the pain I receive from the side effects. So like you said, side effect is a whole other world subject to talk about it. And I'm glad you talked about soccer. I think there's a famous guy, Timothy Matthew Howard, right? professional soccer player, right? He has Tourette syndrome as well, right?
Yes. Yeah.
We will be right back. The Tourette Association of America is the premier nonprofit working to raise awareness, advance research, and provide ongoing support for those with Tourette syndrome or a tic disorder. With a network of over 130 chapters, support groups, and centers of excellence, the TAA engages with communities across the nation in an effort to provide tools, webinars, workshops, and support for all seeking assistance. As a primary sponsor of Tourette's podcast, the TAA supports authentic conversations showcasing the diverse representation of the Tourette community. To learn more, go to tourette.org. That's TOURETTE.org. The Tourette Association of America. Uncontrollable, unstoppable.
Yeah, a lot of people out there, a lot of famous people have Tourette syndrome. Artists, athletes, musicians. So it's definitely Tourette is not something that's really going to hinder our ability to create, to make things better. So knowing that you are athlete, how is a lot of people tell me playing sports, being active, even myself, I'm very active. It's very helpful toward Tourette's. How about your feelings?
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny you mentioned this. I went to the Tourette Association of America conference in Minneapolis. I believe it was in sometime in May. I believe I could be wrong, but and while I was there, I met. This is a whole nother topic of discussion by itself, cool. But I met a lot of wonderful people. One of whom was Callum. Shout out to Callum. He's awesome. He recently underwent deep brain stimulation, so this is to his recovery. I hope he's doing well. But Callum, I met there, and he and I would go to the gym together while we were there, and we would work out. And we spoke about this extensively, how lifting weights and doing all these things and workouts would help our tics like drastically, and the impacts were just out of this world. And I find myself in that same situation, right? Working out, running, and especially playing soccer. I find that the more my focus kind of deviates, the more prevalent my tics become. Yeah. Right. So when I'm focused on soccer in a soccer game, I don't tend to tic. So yeah, it's definitely a relieving outlet. So I can relate with that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, man. Because I was sort of a varsity sports player back in high school myself, But I played golf. I was on a golf team, and I'm not sure if you also play a little bit of golf.
I do.
You do, right?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a mental game. It doesn't matter you play for a team or not. It's all come down to yourself, So yep. So when I'm having a good day and the weather is beautiful and I'm concentrated in my game, I don't tic at all. I'm just so focused, But I remember there were times where my game was off, and also the weather don't cooperate. On top, my teammates or other people are talking smack, and that make me lose focus, and immediately all my tic come back. So I even got into a fist fight once in the middle of a game. While I was going through Tourette, I also exhibit rage attacks.
Right.
How's your temperament? Do you also exhibit rage attacks or anything like that?
I don't believe so. I will say road rage is another thing. I do get a bit frustrated in traffic. I will say that. But rage attacks, as far as that goes, I don't see anything. So I haven't seen anything so far in my life. Nothing to the point where my family or I have noticed it. So yeah, nothing on that end.
Oh wow, you're already driving. Oh yeah, that's true. Because you know what, for New York is more strict. So we get our learning permit at 17, we drive at 18. But for most other states, you can get your license at 16.
Yep.
Talking to other Touretters, a lot of them, some of them do complain difficulty of driving. I myself like to drive. When I drive, I'm focused on the road. Again, when I'm focused, I deviate from the ticks, so I don't really tick at all. How are you feeling that when it comes to driving? Does tick bother you or don't bother you?
Yeah, this is a great question. Yeah, I love to talk about this. So, I do find that when I drive, my ticks are somewhat non-existent, right? And the only kind of debilitating part of my Tourette's that shows up are these, and this may be, this is probably more associated with OCD, comorbidity of Tourette, but are these obsessive thoughts, and intrusive thoughts as well, and that can be kind of scary when your brain just all of a sudden thinks, hey, what if I drive off the road here? That's not
Right.
not at all comforting. And it's about knowing that those are just thoughts and not actions that you're actually going to do. So, yeah, that's the only part though. My ticks are fine when I'm driving. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not, a lot of time I tell people Tourette syndrome is not just about the tics, but the comorbidities that can be really damaging to us, So you mentioned a little bit about intrusive thoughts. I'm assuming you're also diagnosed with OCD, right?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Wow, yeah, it's very interesting how you said all of a sudden you had a weird thought about driving off the road. That's exactly it, because I think there's something called a silent thief, where suddenly we have a topic and we just beginning to flip the topic over and over analyze, create a different scenario, and when that happens, these thoughts races in our mind, and sometimes we lose focus, and sometimes we are in our own little zone. And it can be dangerous, but then once you realize it's all in your head, you could snap out of it. But it does take some practice,
It does.
Like
it definitely does.
I have fear for heights, so whenever I'm standing up high, I will just automatically imagining, and I'm beginning to see like a motion video of myself falling off, but it's not happening, right? But then this thought just come at me over and over, and it can be debilitating, and that's why a lot of people just talk about the tick aspect itself, but when it comes to comorbidity like OCD, these pose, the peak of the negative experience for us, but a lot of people they just don't see it.
Right, and that's where. Are you familiar with the Tourette iceberg? That graphic?
Yes. I love that. I love that graphic.
I love it. It's so illustrative, and it perfectly portrays comorbidities that are associated with Tourette's. People see these motor tics, they may hear the vocal tics, right? But beneath the surface, there's a lot more going on. You have the rage attacks, as you mentioned. You have OCD, you have ADHD, ADD. All these things, and it shows that Tourette's isn't just one thing. It's often more than one thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, that definitely deserves some recognition.
Yeah, it is. It is. And the medication I took at 12 ORAP, it enhanced the mood swing comorbidity of Tourette, which I firmly believe it was the onset of my manic depression. So I'm at 42. I'm newly diagnosed to bipolar. I also struggle with depression. However, the depressive feeling and the manic feeling isn't new to me, because pretty much a month after I took the medication, which I took for 8 years, I felt the extreme fluctuation of mood, and from that, beginning to deal with anxieties. Do you have any anxiety issues?
Unfortunately, yes. I would say my entire family. We're kind of all very anxious, very on edge all the time. But yeah, I do struggle with anxiety myself, and it's very debilitating. Also, I'm very sorry to hear about your diagnosis. I hope you're handling this well, and there's no doubt that you are. You seem like a very strong and capable person, so there's no doubt that you'll get through this. And I'm actually confident that you will come out of it a better and stronger person. So,
thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I'm like 9 months into my current treatment, and I'm doing pretty good actually, and especially with opportunity like this to be able to guest host on Tourette podcast and talk to more
Right.
audiences. This make me feel great. For me, it's always helping other is helping myself. So thank you so much for the blessing.
I love that. Helping others is helping myself. I can relate to that. I love that. That's so. Yeah, there's a feeling I get when I help people, and when I when I educate people about Tourette's, and when I help others with Tourette's. It's unparalleled. Yeah, that's awesome. But anxiety, going back to that, I do struggle with anxiety. And I haven't been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. No form of anxiety disorder so far. But I would say that the effects of anxiety are very very frustrating, and they're very severe at times, and it's very scary when these symptoms do get bad. When feelings of anxiety are very intense, and they make you lose all sorts of logic and all sense of reasoning, right? And so it's definitely.
Again, your speech delivery, your thoughts are beyond your age. So
Thank you.
I talk to many adults struggling with anxieties, and they couldn't contextualize or form words to describe how they feel, but you make it perfectly sound, and that was just beautiful. So I kudos to you, man. That was really good.
Right. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
So how's your family on this? You find them supportive overall?
Without a doubt, yes. And it's very it's a tricky situation, because I love being around my family, and I always have. They're great people, and they're very comforting. But I know that my tics are annoying somewhat to listen to, and it can be frustrating to deal with my tics when they get severe. When I throw a bucket of popcorn across the room when we have a movie night, right? That's frustrating. And it's been difficult having to remove myself from situations and removing myself from my family for their benefit, because I don't want to worsen the situation. Kind of, I want their experience to be enjoyable, and so. But they're very supportive. They've helped me seek treatment, get prescribed medication. They're awesome, very supportive of me, and they're always there for me if I need to talk, right? And unfortunately, this isn't the case for everybody, right? And not everybody has people they can go home to at the end of the day and speak with about. Some people with Tourette or with other neurodiversities are shamed by their own family for it, right? And I think it's important to acknowledge that, right? Like we're all in different situations, and we all experience different things. And so I think by providing support to everybody, and that's what I love about the TAA, is how they provide support, and they're able to provide support to people like me who do have those resources. Thankfully, I do have family that I can speak with, and family who provide me with treatment. But they also provide resources to those who may not have access to that. And that's awesome. And I think that's what it's all about, right? It's about equality of treatment. So yeah, in the end, my family's been really supportive, but I also think it's important to acknowledge that not everybody has that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
When you say throwing a bucket of popcorn, is that a figurative speech, or did you ever actually did it?
Oh man. So one of my tics, I throw things. I've thrown everything. I think I've lost, I want to say 3 phones. Broken 3 phones. I know. It sounds expensive just saying that, but I've thrown 3 phones, 2 of which went into a lake.
Oh wow.
I know it was
So it's
yeah,
not
quite crazy.
it's not an angry throw. It's just you just wanted to throw it.
Yeah, it's just a tick. You know, it's not associated with rage or anything. But I do throw things. I throw popcorn. I throw erasers, pencils, cups. You know, what have you.
Very interesting. Because
Yeah.
when come to if you look at the Tourette iceberg, I think you also mentioned behavior, right? So
Right.
so when you're throwing things, people automatically assume that you're a bad behaving kid, right? You're disruptive,
Yes. Yeah.
but then yet they don't understand that this is actually a tick. So I know some
Yeah.
people. I read about people getting in trouble in school, and then with these behaviors commonly associated with maybe someone just acting up. Yet when he or she have Tourette syndrome, it become difficult to explain to authority. So
Yeah.
have you got yourself into a lot of trouble because of this?
So having undergone CBIT therapy, I'm able to kind of, I would, for lack of a better word, suppress my tics. I'm able to kind of sense that predispository urge that I get before I tick, you know? And I would, the best way to describe it is kind of like a tingle or like the need to sneeze.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of able to anticipate that, and I'm able to do what I call counter movements. So let's say I want to throw something, I'll just put my hands in my pockets.
Yeah.
Right. And while that does kind of create more stress, that may snowball or have a snowball effect, I also think that it prevents me from doing socially inappropriate things and getting in trouble. So that's been a huge help for me. But I haven't gotten in major trouble for throwing things. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally I know about CBIT, but having Tourette in the 90s, they didn't talk about CBIT so much, But I developed like competing behavior, counter ticks on my own. Just simply trying to, like you said, I'm not necessarily want to suppress it. I wanted to channel that energy, channel that the trigger somewhere else. So like when I used to say FUB a lot, and I realized it's a 3-syllable thing, right? Dun 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 dun. So I ended up finding a noise. So I gotta hit the right tone in order to satisfy the urge, So I used to go.
Exactly.
So instead of fuck you bitch, now I be like eventually I do it over and over and over and over. So that took over. So until now, one of my vocal tick is still and people have no idea that this came from corpolalia. So when I do tell people how I did it, they're like, "Oh, did you take CPIT? This is like one of the skill sets." I said, "I didn't take CPIT, but this is just something through socialization because I want to mask it. Yeah, I still want to satisfy it." So I sort of figure things out, But then people tell me this is what people learn through CPIT. I said, "Oh wow, that's a very very interesting skill set for people with Tourette's to learn."
Right. That's fascinating. Holy cow. So the kind of counter movement became a tick itself.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's actually really cool that you're able to teach yourself that.
Thank you. Yeah, it wasn't easy. Like you said, putting your hands in your pocket made things worse. But I guess just over time, you develop a habit out of it, and then it became like second nature.
Right. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Oh wow! Look at this. I love great conversations because great conversations leads to faster time. So we're almost hitting the 45 mark. So I know you play sports. You have Tourette. You're dealing with comorbidities. I mean, a lot of people always ask about coping mechanisms. So besides keeping yourself focused, doing sports, what other coping mechanism do you have?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, and this is up until recently, but podcasting has been very relieving. Just speaking and using my voice, and it's difficult to describe, but the best way I could go about it would be it just provides me with a sense of control over my voice that I don't get with Tourette, and that's what comforts me. And so podcasting is very relieving. Not just that, but I listen to podcasts. I love them. They kind of tune me out from very severe and intense, external stimuli, right? Like if it's very loud in a restaurant, right, I'll just put my and I find that this is the best thing that's like ever happened to me as far as Tourette's goes. These AirPods, they're wonderful. And they just help me kind of tune things out and lessen the intensity of noise, and it really helps my tics. So I love that. That's one of mine. And then chewing gum, last but not least. I'm always chewing gum. Sometimes I get in trouble for smacking it, but yeah, it helps my tics a lot. Because when I'm chewing gum or I can't have a satisfying vocal tic, right? But yeah, one of the things, and I mentioned this earlier, I'm a bit of a nerd, right? Self-proclaimed, but I love researching things, and I love specifically neuroscience. I love neuroscience. I think the brain is fascinating, and I've been looking recently into Tourette and the mechanisms underlying Tourette, and it's just making me, appreciate my brain more and more. It's fascinating, right? And it's crazy, and that's what kind of inspired me to create my podcast. But getting back to the point, I think more research can be done behind Tourette, and I think it's kind of discomforting knowing that we don't know the cause, or the root cause, I should say, of the condition itself. So it's like I definitely want to see a more efforts being made, and I love that the TAA is working with centers of excellence across the world even to do that. So that's awesome. But yeah, do you have any interest in Tourette research or the science behind Tourette, or what?
I absolutely do. This is why I enjoy engaging on various Tourette syndrome groups on Facebook. Like Tourette support group. I'm not sure if you belong on that.
I do. I do.
Oh, cool, awesome. That's why it's a great site, great group. A lot of moderator admins. They also work for TAA. Although the group is not about clinical, but it share a lot of experience, share a lot of new insights. So I learned a lot. I used to mod for that group also, and I learned a lot from just reading about all these stories. Plus, a lot of parents, they follow me. A lot of other members, they also follow me. So we teach each other. So there's just Tourette has been around since the 1890s until now. There's still a lot of theories. We still can really hit the nail on what's happening, but collectively, there's more and more knowledge being built on top of it. So I'm definitely love to pursue more on this. So it sounds like you and I, we can continue this conversation on each other's podcast as we're running out of time on this one. But before we end this, do you have any last words, anything else you want to share with the audience?
To those listening that may be like doubting themselves or feeling kind of hopeless or shamed or flawed, just know that you're perfect the way you are. Know that you are loved, and know that you will be successful despite these perceived flaws and these perceived differences, right? You were made this way for a reason, and you go through all these struggles and you go through all these challenges to be the person that you need to be for somebody else someday. So know that you're doing this for somebody else too, and just stay strong. You'll be great, and yeah, you are loved. Remember that.
You're loved, and you're definitely not alone.
Definitely not alone.
Definitely not, man. Thank you so much, Slayton. It's been a pleasure speaking to you again. I want to thank Ben for bringing me on to do this guest hosting, and I can't wait to speak to you on your podcast as well, Slayton.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And before we kind of finish this up, huge thank you to Ben. Huge thank you to Peter for this opportunity. And yeah, it's been a pleasure. This time is completely flown by. I feel like we've only been talking for 5 minutes or so. So I could speak for hours, to be honest.
Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much to Peter Zhao. And by the way, I'll put links to their podcasts in the show notes with this episode at tourettespodcast.com. They could have talked for hours more. I mean, they clearly had a groove. There was a lot to talk about, but I'm grateful they could give us 45 minutes or so to listen in. That was excellent. Loving these guest host episodes, which diversifies the kinds of questions asked and the kinds of observations made. And if you have any observations or thoughts or moments of clarity or wisdom or anything, please feel free and feel encouraged to share it and talk about it in the Tourette's Podcast discussion group on Facebook. Thanks, Sophia, as always, for running the ship. Tourette's Podcast has been around since 2018, but is growing all the time. Thanks so much, and hello to all the new listeners. This podcast is made possible by the Tourette Association of America, online at tourette.org. Uncontrollable, unstoppable, resources, advice, help in finding a provider, funding for research. There's so much they do, tourette.org, and please, if you can, support them with a donation. It helps them to bring so many free resources to this community. And thanks, of course, to Geeks Rising, the podcast network that extends Tourette's Podcast to a general listening audience. I had a great hangout with them the other night, catching up and talking about things like horror movies. For anyone still listening, what's your favorite horror movie? We're getting closer to Halloween, and we can ask about that, right? Let's do a general non-Tourette question. What's your favorite horror movie? And what's the best movie to see on a big screen of any genre? That's another thing that we talked about at the Geeks Rising Hangout. Anyway, geeksrising.com for this and other amazing podcasts and support for the Tourette community. Geeks Rising supports the mission of the podcast. They signed up Tourette's Podcast because they want to help get these stories out there. We'll talk to you next week with another fantastic episode, more great voices from the community. We'll talk to you then. This is Ben Brown.